ABC 10 News at 5 starts right now.
In just a matter of weeks, San Diegans could be allowed to watch the Padres play in person at Petco Park. The adjustments the state of California is making to its reopening guidelines. Plus, a new group of San Diegans will soon be eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine. How your doctor can get you on that list. And the contentious issue that is stalling talks over the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill.
ABC 10 News at 5 starts now.
The San Diego Padres, Legoland, and Disneyland just got a huge boost from the state of California. Attendance at sporting venues and large theme parks hasn't been allowed for almost a year. But today, officials announced modifications to the state's reopening plan. Good evening, I'm Lindsay Pena.
And I'm Steve Atkinson. That new guideline will allow these places to operate at limited capacity much sooner than anticipated. Our ABC 10 News reporter Anthony Pura is live outside Petco Park, where some fans will be allowed on opening day. This is good news, Anthony.
That's right. This is very welcome news here for many of the businesses and restaurants here near Petco Park. For example, I spoke with the owner of Social Tap here. They're right next to the ballpark. They're closed right now, getting everything remodeled, getting everything ready for the start of the baseball season. They were hoping that fans would be allowed back on opening day.
It gives all the neighboring restaurants and businesses a boost too, just because there's going to be a buzz downtown again with the Padres putting such a great product on the field for us.
So here's what the new guidelines say about outdoor live events and places like ballparks. Starting April 1st, in the purple tier, capacity will be limited to 100 people or fewer. Attendance will be limited to regional visitors, people living within 120 miles, and advance reservations will be required. Concessions will not be allowed yet at the ballpark in the purple tier. Now, in the red tier, capacity jumps to 20%, including suites with 25% occupancy per suite and no more than 3 households per suite allowed. In the red tier, concessions are allowed for in-seat concessions only. Now let's go to amusement parks. Once the region enters the red tier, they'll be allowed to be limited to 15% capacity. In the orange tier, that increases to 25%. In the yellow tier, 35%, and attendance will be limited to in-state visitors. Right now, San Diego County is still in the purple tier, but obviously there's a lot of optimism here that we will be entering the red tier soon. Reporting live tonight, Anthony Pura, ABC 10 News.
Anthony, thank you. Governor Gavin Newsom also signed sweeping legislation aimed at reopening schools across the state of California. The bill provides a total of $6.6 billion for districts to reopen and get students back in the classroom.
There's $2 billion to really incent schools to open, to really give them the confidence to do it. And there's $4.6 billion that really says we will address the learning loss.
That bill aims for schools to reopen by April 1st. If districts don't make reopening an option by the start of April, they will lose 1% of their share of the funds for every day they miss the deadline. The new law doesn't force schools to open or force parents to send their kids back.
In just 10 days, a new group of San Diegans will be eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine. It includes people with specific underlying conditions, but there is a loophole if you don't fall into those categories. ABC 10 News reporter Jennifer De La Cruz explains how your doctor can get you on the list.
On March 15th, vaccine eligibility will expand to Californians between 16 and 64 years old with underlying medical conditions. They include things like specific types of cancer, kidney disease, heart conditions, and type 2 diabetes. But at the end of that list, there's a caveat. You'll also be eligible if your doctor determines you're likely to develop severe illness or death from COVID-19. Dr. Ghazala Sharif with Scripps Health says figuring that out poses quite a challenge.
It puts the burden on the physician to decide you can get one, you can't. And I think that's very, very unfair to put a physician in that spot, and to the patient as well, where they're trying to lobby for themselves.
Patients will have to get a note from their doctor saying they've deemed them eligible for the vaccine. But with hundreds of thousands of patients at Scripps alone, it's a logistical nightmare. To avoid having all of those people call their doctors, Scripps is pushing out letters to patients who qualify.
As more and more criteria come out, then we can do from chart review, we can send those letters to you so you don't have to call. It's going to cause a lot of undue stress on the patient and on the physicians.
Even if you're lucky enough to get that coveted doctor's note, you're still not guaranteed to get the vaccine since there's not enough supply. Dr. Sharif fears they'll run into the same challenge they had when the vaccine first came out.
We had over 200,000 patients that met criteria, and we only had 10,000 doses. I'm really afraid the same thing is going to happen again.
Kaiser Permanente released this statement saying expanding eligibility to people with underlying conditions makes sense, but they added in part, demand for the vaccine still outweighs our supply, and we are working diligently to administer the vaccine to the communities we serve as equitably and efficiently as possible. Jennifer Dela Cruz, ABC 10 News.
Scripps patients who fall into the underlying condition category will be able to make their vaccine appointments using their online portal starting March 15th. Some advocacy groups are applauding the state's new plan to set aside 40% of available doses for people living in zip codes hit hardest by COVID-19. Roberto Alcantar with the Chicano Federation says the Latino population in San Diego has been severely impacted, yet vaccination rates remain low.
After the first couple of weeks of vaccinations, only about 14% of the vaccines that were administered were going to the Latino community.
About a dozen zip codes in San Diego County will be eligible for the doses being set aside. These areas rank low on the state's Healthy Places Index. It takes into account factors such as access to health care, income, and education. And San Diego celebrated its 1 millionth vaccine dose today. That includes both first and second doses, so fewer than 1 million people have been vaccinated so far. Nearly 70% of Americans have been vaccinated against COVID or plan to do so. The Pew Research Center surveyed more than 10,000 adults across the country. 19% said they've received at least one dose of the vaccine, and another 50% plan to get the shot. That's a 9% increase from November. Democrats are much more likely than Republicans to get the vaccine, 83 to 56%.
The White House is also turning up the pressure on senators to pass President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. But as ABC's Elizabeth Schulze reports, that bill is facing a barrage of amendments on the floor and strong pushback from Republicans.
A contentious debate is underway in the Senate over President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. One by one, senators are introducing and voting on amendments to the bill, a process known as vote-a-rama.
The Senate's going to take a lot of votes, but we are going to power through and finish this bill however long it takes. The American people are counting on us, and our nation depends on it.
Republicans argue the price tag of the package is too high. They're planning to introduce several amendments as part of an effort to delay a vote on the bill.
Republicans have many ideas to improve the bill, many ideas. And we're about to vote on all kinds of amendments in the hopes that some of these ideas make it into the final product.
Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders also put forward an amendment trying to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. But that effort failed, with 8 Democrats voting against it.
And it is not acceptable to me that half of our people live in paycheck to paycheck, and millions of people are trying to get by on $9, $10, $11 an hour.
In an evenly split Senate, and with the COVID relief bill unlikely to win any support from Republicans, all 50 Democrats need to stick together to pass the legislation. The bill includes those $1,400 stimulus checks for individuals earning less than $75,000 per year, $160 billion for coronavirus testing and vaccines, and help for struggling small businesses.
And Democrats say the final deadline to get a bill on President Biden's desk is March 14th. That's when federal unemployment benefits are set to expire. Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
And local House Democrats gathered this afternoon to talk about the coronavirus relief package. Congressman Mike Levin said that he expects more twists and turns as the legislation goes through the Senate.
But as soon as they send that back to us in the House, we're going to pass that bill in the House. We're going to send it to Joe Biden. He's going to sign it into law. My friends, help is on the way.
In the meantime, local House Republican Darrell Issa says he does not support the bill in its current form. He says nearly 2/3 of the package is non-COVID related and needs revisions.
I'm not optimistic that it'll be a great bill, but it certainly can't be worse than one that spent more than 2/3 of its money on things that had nothing to do with this pandemic or people getting back to work.
ICE said he supports any funding that would get people back to work and make the vaccine more available. And you can keep up with any developments surrounding the pandemic by downloading our free mobile app. Just go to the App Store and search 10 News.
Some of the people who survived a massive crash between a big rig and an SUV during a suspected human smuggling attempt are still being treated at San Diego hospitals. Tuesday's crash in Imperial County killed 13 people. Today, ABC 10 News reporter Jennifer Kastner spoke with a representative from the local Mexican consulate about the investigation.
The Mexican consulate said it's been working closely with the families to provide updates and legal resources. The Mexican consulate in San Diego shared new details Friday about the survivors of Tuesday's collision in Imperial County that killed 13 people during a suspected human smuggling attempt.
Well, they are in a delicate but stable situation.
Carlos Gonzalez Gutierrez confirmed that the youngest patient here is a 16-year-old boy from Mexico who reportedly has major injuries. The consulate has been working with border agents to get emergency clearance for his mother to come see him.
We helped his mother to cross in a humanitarian visa in order to be with him.
The boy and a woman from Guatemala are being treated at Scripps Mercy. 4 others are at UC San Diego with major injuries, 2 men and a woman from Mexico and another woman from Guatemala. 6 others went to hospitals outside of San Diego, including a 15-year-old Jane Doe. Officials say the victims were migrants being smuggled across the border and that the SUV had been stripped of nearly all its seats. 25 people were inside when it was struck by a big rig. Investigators say the SUV was one of 2 seen on surveillance video going through a hole in the border fence that morning. The other SUV reportedly caught fire, but those who were inside made it out safely and were detained. Thursday, immigrants' rights group Alliance San Diego said that although border agents deny any involvement in what led to the crash, there are still questions about whether there was a chase. Agents maintain that they were not in pursuit of the SUV.
Border Patrol has said that they were not chasing this van. But I have, as I was telling you, I have not had a direct contact with Border Patrol about this case because that's the responsibility of our consulate in Calexico.
A representative with the Mexican consulate in Calexico said Friday that they have no knowledge of a chase. This week, a Border Patrol chief stated that human smugglers have little regard for human life, adding in part, those who may be contemplating crossing the border illegally should pause to think of the dangers that all too often end in tragedy. Border agents said on Friday that they have no new updates to provide on the crash. Jennifer Kastner, ABC 10 News.
For the first time in history, a pope is visiting the country of Iraq. Pope Francis arrived in Baghdad earlier today. The Vatican says this trip is an act of love for the people who need it there. Just this week, 10 rockets were fired from a truck on U.S. forces on the Al-Assad air base in western Iraq. That resulted in an American contractor's death. I spoke to a local leader of the Chaldean community whose sister is a nun in Baghdad.
She was at the church when the Pope arrived, and she was like very close to him, so you don't believe it how she felt, for them this is like, you know, somebody coming from heaven. You know, it's very blessing.
Stringent measures are in place because of health and security risks. That includes a curfew for the Pope's entire 4-day trip.